Hi everyone, John Heath here again for MiltonRose Learning with another Let's Learn video on King Lear. So a twisted tale of strife, power and deceit. So all in a day's work for Shakespeare. So we're going to be looking at some of the key plot events and some of the basic genre conventions for King Lear. Then we will look at some of the key context, because history is very important, especially when we're going this far back for Shakespeare. And then we'll round off by looking at some of the key characters and what happens to them in the play, and also what they may symbolise. Okay, so first off then, if we start looking at some of the basics. Now, there we go. So first off then, in terms of genre then, this is very much a tragedy, and it blends personal and national collapse, because obviously King Lear rules over the kingdom. And it explores kind of quite twisted themes of madness, betrayal, power, justice, all within a classical tragic kind of staging. So it's extremely thematically rich and very, very political. It's very important to understand that. And it explores, as Shakespeare normally does, human nature. Is really close to Shakespeare's heart, the nature of political power and morality through very complex kind of characterization. Now, in terms of a plot summary, King Lear, as we can see in the picture, he kind of divides his kingdom up. Okay, he's getting old and he decides that he's going to divide his kingdom. But he doesn't make the right decision about who to leave the kingdom to. So he bases his political decisions on things like flattery, disowning an honest daughter of his, Cordelia, and empowering deceitful daughters called Goneril and Regan. So he kind of backs the wrong horses, if I can put it in that way. He doesn't kind of side with the right people who have his interests at heart. Anyway, he's betrayed and stripped of his power, and Lear then spirals into madness as all of his daughters scheme and plot to kind of take over the throne. Now, as the plot kind of continues, there's almost a parallel kind of plot going on between a character called Gloucester, who is deceived by his own son Edmund and then brutally punished for his loyalty towards King Lear. Cordelia, who is the one daughter who is very loyal to King Lear, she returns to help him, but both of them end up dying, because obviously this is very much a tragedy, and the play ends in that kind of tragic loss. And in doing so, it highlights themes of pride, family betrayal, political breakdown, and things like that. So the whole kind of kingdom splinters and fractures upon their deaths. So extremely tragic kind of play, really. Now, in terms of context then, now history is very important for any Shakespearean play, because obviously we're going, a long time into the past. So first off then, we need to understand monarchy and authority in this period. So King Lear then, as a play, explores the fragility of power and the consequences of a ruler's poor judgment. We are very much in the period of absolutism, where a king or queen kind of had pretty much absolute power, which is fine if they're a great ruler, but it's awful if you have a ruler with poor judgment, because there's no checks or balances on them to hold them back. So therefore, Shakespeare is critiquing absolute monarchy or absolutism by showing how Lear's abdication leads to chaos, civil war and personal ruin. If the monarch is not up to the job and there's no checks and balances on them, then you can get into real political problems, such as civil wars and kind of, big issues can tear the kingdom apart. So it's very important to understand that piece of context. Then the second one is what we would call family and inheritance in this period. So the play reflects early 17th century anxieties around about inheritance and the division of land, because obviously if you're a king or queen in this period, who you leave the kingdom to is a matter of absolute importance to the nation. Now, there were loads of ways, I won't go into them right now, but there were loads of ways in which you could leave your kingdom to somebody. So, for instance, primogeniture, where you just leave it to the eldest child and they inherit everything, is a fairly standard form of inheritance. But there were others, such as gavelkind, where you basically break up your kingdom and you share it amongst your children, which is kind of what Lear is kind of erring towards in some ways. But it creates problems because then all the children start kind of fighting over the land. So Lear's decision to divide his kingdom mirrors real fears about dynastic instability within Shakespeare's England at this time, and the dangers of favouritism within families. It's a really interesting part of the context that would be really good for you to research. And then the final piece of context is justice and social order. So King Lear raises powerful questions about divine and human justice. Is there any justice in the world? So as the society collapses into cruelty and even madness, Shakespeare is arguably questioning whether the world is morally fair, or is it just brutally indifferent? Some of the characters in this play kind of suffer absolutely horrendous fates, and sometimes when they're not justified at all. And Shakespeare seems to be critiquing there the idea of, kind of divine justice, whether God really does have our back and kind of support us, or whether God just almost looks on and just looks on and doesn't do anything. It's a kind of big theological kind of issue within the play. Now, if we move forward to the characters then, let's have a good look at some of the key characters. Okay. So obviously, as you can see in his image of anguish there, that is very much King Lear. So he is an ageing monarch who rashly divides his kingdom based on flattery. So obviously that gavelkind, which we were talking about, is kind of cropping up again. And he says, I'm going to split my kingdom up, but he bases it on the wrong decisions. So he represents pride, the abuse of power, not just by him but by other people around him, and the vulnerability of old age. We all get old, and it's dangerous when you're a king in this era and you are old, because you don't have the vigor or the mental kind of perception that you used to, and that comes to us all. So I think that's a really quite profound theme within the play, and he symbolizes the tragic journey then from ignorance to insight when he realizes what's happened, and then arguable redemption, although you could debate that in any essay. Then moving on, we have Cordelia. So Cordelia is Lear's youngest daughter, and she ends up being disowned for her honesty and for her integrity. She represents truth, loyalty and unconditional love. She actually really does love her father. And she symbolises moral goodness and also the tragic cost of honesty in a corrupt world. She's an extremely tragic character in the sense that she's one of the only people who actually tells the truth, but she doesn't get a happy ending because of that. And that's, again, quite a philosophical argument that you can have in any essay if you're talking about Cordelia. Then we have Goneril with the very fitting snake emoji there. So she is Lear's eldest daughter, but she's very manipulative and she's power hungry. So she has almost that tragic flaw within her. So she represents greed and ambition, masked by false affection. She's a very good liar. So she lies to Lear's face and says, oh, I kind of really love you and things like that. But it's just to hide her ambition so she can get what she wants. So she symbolises the danger of deceit and unchecked authority. You've got to watch what you're doing around Goneril. Okay, then we have another daughter, Regan. So Regan is Lear's middle daughter. So equally cruel and deceptive as Goneril. And she represents cruelty, jealousy, the lust for power, very similar, and symbolises how absolute power can corrupt absolutely, as the phrase goes. So the naked lust for power filters through Regan as well. Then we have Edmund. So Edmund is Gloucester's illegitimate son. He's very cunning and ambitious, I should say, and represents, again, deceit, manipulation, but also the breakdown of the natural order as the kingdom starts to disintegrate. Okay, and symbolises social resentment because he's illegitimate in this, and in this period that was not a good thing. You would be ostracised for that, and the desire to overturn traditional hierarchies. He wants to make his way in the world and kind of overcome his illegitimate kind of nature. Then we have Gloucester, an extremely tragic figure. So Gloucester is a nobleman loyal to King Lear, but he's ultimately betrayed by Edmund, okay, his illegitimate son. So he represents blindness, both literal and metaphorical, because as you'll read in a really horrendous kind of scene, but Gloucester has his eyes took out. So that represents kind of blindness literally, but also metaphorically, being blind to the political dangers around you. That's what that kind of really symbolises. And therefore symbolises suffering as a path to gaining insight and arguably spiritual awakening. And then we have down here, we have Kent. So Kent is Lear's loyal servant who disguises himself to continue serving the king. So therefore Kent represents loyalty, honesty and moral courage, which is sorely lacking in this play, as I'm sure you can kind of imagine, and symbolises the enduring value of integrity in a world of betrayal. Not everybody is evil in this play. There are little shining lights of honesty and integrity which almost shine through the play. So it's not all bad, dare I say. Now then, if we just have a little overview there, then what we've done is we've given you hopefully a really nice introduction to some of the basics of King Lear at the start, then just teased out some of the key context, which would be lovely for you to research there if you want to get those high marks, and then started the journey on understanding some of the key characters who are very complex in this brilliant play. Now, hopefully, if you found that kind of really useful, please do hit the like, subscribe icon and tap the bell as well, which is really useful for us, and it just helps the channel grow. We'll obviously be making a lot more videos on King Lear as well, so obviously keep an eye out for those. And it just remains to say really, but obviously thanks for watching, and it's been a pleasure. So take care and we'll see you soon.